They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But for the woman they left for dead, it was a 5-course meal served in the very boardroom they stole from her. She was the pregnant wife cast out with nothing but the clothes on her back, while her husband and his mistress flaunted their new life paid for with her tears. They thought she had vanished, a forgotten tragedy. They were wrong. 5 years later, a mysterious millionaire bought their failing company. And when she walked in to take her seat at the head of the table, their world didn't just crumble, it imploded. The rain in downtown Seattle had a certain rhythm, a relentless drumming that usually soothed Bianca. Tonight, it felt like a taunt. Each drop that slid down the floor-to-ceiling windows of her penthouse apartment seemed to mock the fragile perfection of her life. Inside, the air was warm, scented with the vanilla and sandalwood of an expensive candle. On the polished mahogany dining table, a single plate of untouched salmon and asparagus grew cold. It was their 5th wedding anniversary. Liam was late. Again. Bianca traced the rim of her water glass, her gaze drifting to a framed photo on the mantelpiece. It was from their wedding day. Liam, with his effortlessly charming smile and eyes the color of the Pacific on a clear day, was looking at her as if she were the only woman in the universe. She, in turn, was beaming her heart so full she thought it might burst. They were the golden couple, the envy of their circle. Liam, the brilliant co-founder of Innovatech Solutions, a rising star in the city's tech scene. And Bianca, his loving wife, the silent partner who had poured her entire inheritance into his dream, believing in him more than she believed in herself. Her phone buzzed, jolting her from her reverie. It was a text from Liam. "So sorry, Angel. Stuck in a crisis meeting. Can't be helped. We'll celebrate this weekend, I promise. Happy anniversary. I love you." A familiar pang of disappointment, sharp and unwelcome, pierced through her. It had become a pattern. The late nights, the cancelled dates, the vague excuses that always revolved around work. She tried to swallow her unease. He was building an empire for them, he always said, for their future. And there was a new secret reason to believe in that future. A reason she had been waiting for the perfect moment to reveal. Her hand drifted instinctively to her stomach. It was still flat, showing no sign of the tiny, precious life growing within her. 2 months. After years of trying, of quiet heartbreak and dashed hopes, she was finally pregnant. The thought was a secret sunbeam, a private joy she held close. Tonight was supposed to have been the night. She'd planned it all, a candle-lit dinner, his favorite wine, which she would pretend to sip, and then she would give him a small gift box containing a single, tiny baby shoe. Pushing her chair back, she decided to surprise him at the office. A wave of guilt washed over her. Liam hated being disturbed at work, but it was their anniversary. Surely even a crisis couldn't stand in the way of that. She'd just drop off the dinner she'd so lovingly prepared. A small romantic gesture. The Innovatech Solutions headquarters occupied the top 3 floors of a sleek glass and steel skyscraper. The security guard, a kindly man named George, greeted her with a warm smile. "Evening, Mrs. Hayes. Working late to keep the boss company." Something like that. "George?" She smiled back, her spirits lifting slightly. The elevator ride was silent, ascending through the building like a breath being held. The 48th floor, the executive suite, was eerily quiet. The bustling energy of the day had been replaced by a hushed stillness. Liam's office door was slightly ajar, a sliver of light spilling into the darkened hallway. Bianca's heart quickened with anticipation. She pushed the door open gently. "Liam, honey, I brought you." The words died in her throat. The scene before her was one of such profound betrayal that her mind struggled to process it. The crisis meeting was not in the boardroom. It was here. Liam was there, his back to the door, his expensive suit jacket carelessly thrown over a chair. And with him was Sarah Jenkins, his personal assistant. Sarah was a woman Bianca knew well, young, ambitious, with a razor-sharp intellect and a wardrobe to match. Bianca had always been kind to her, seeing a younger version of herself in Sarah's drive. But the woman in Liam's office now was a stranger. Her professional blouse was unbuttoned, her skirt hiked high on her thighs. She was perched on the edge of Liam's sprawling executive desk, her legs wrapped around his waist. His hands were tangled in her sleek blonde hair, their mouths locked in a kiss so passionate, so raw, it was a violation. Bianca made a small, strangled sound, a noise of pure animal pain. They sprang apart. Liam spun around his face, a mask of horror and disbelief. Sarah, however, looked almost triumphant. A slow, cruel smirk played on her lips as she leisurely straightened her clothes, her eyes cold and calculating meeting Bianca's. "Bianca, what are you doing here?" Liam stammered, his voice hoarse. He took a step towards her, his hands outstretched as if to ward off the reality of the situation. But Bianca couldn't hear him. A roaring sound filled her ears, the sound of her world shattering into a million irreparable pieces. The carefully constructed facade of her life, the love, the trust, the shared dreams, it was all a lie, a sick, elaborate joke. 5 years, she whispered the words barely audible. We've been married for 5 years. Bianca, listen to me. It's not what it looks like. He pleaded the classic, pathetic refrain of the guilty. It was Sarah who answered, her voice dripping with venomous sweetness. "Oh, I think it's exactly what it looks like," she said, sliding off the desk and walking towards Liam, possessively linking her arm through his. "Isn't it time you told her, Liam, about us?" Bianca's eyes flickered from her husband's ashen face to the smug woman beside him. "Us." Liam wouldn't meet her gaze. He stared at a point on the floor, his jaw tight. "Sarah and I, we're in love." The word struck Bianca with the force of a physical blow. Love. He used that word to describe this cheap, sordid affair, while texting the same hollow sentiment to his wife. "Liam has been wanting to tell you for months." Sarah continued, her tone conversational, as if they were discussing the weather. "He just didn't know how. He didn't want to hurt you." She paused, then added with a saccharine smile, "But I guess this works, too. Rips the bandage right off, doesn't it?" The room began to spin. Bianca clutched the doorframe for support, her body trembling. The baby. Her mind screamed the word. Her secret, her tiny beacon of hope, now felt like a lead weight in her womb. How could she bring a child into this wasteland of deceit? "I want you out of my house." Bianca finally managed, her voice shaking with a rage she didn't know she possessed. "Both of you, out!" Liam finally looked at her, but his eyes were cold, devoid of the love she once cherished. The shock had worn off, replaced by a chilling resolve. "Actually, Bianca," he said, his tone flat and businesslike, "it's not your house. What are you talking about? My name is on the deed." "Was," Sarah corrected her, her smile widening. "You signed some papers last month, remember? Liam said they were for refinancing, a formality." Bianca's blood ran cold. She remembered. Liam had rushed in one morning, a stack of documents in hand, saying their accountant needed her signature urgently. He'd pointed she'd signed. She had trusted him implicitly. "Those papers," Liam explained, his voice devoid of any emotion, "transferred all your assets into a new holding company. My holding company. The penthouse, the cars, even your shares in Innovatech. The shares you bought with your inheritance." The air left Bianca's lungs. He hadn't just cheated on her. He had systematically erased her. He had stripped her of everything: her home, her security, her future. He had planned this for months. Every loving word, every shared smile, every promise for the future had been a calculated lie. "You're penniless, Bianca," Sarah said, savoring each word. "And you're trespassing. I think it's time for you to go." Liam stood by, silent and complicit, as Sarah picked up the phone on his desk. "Security. Yes, we have an unauthorized individual on the 48th floor. A woman. She appears to be unstable. Please escort her from the building." Tears streamed down Bianca's face, hot and furious. She looked at Liam, searching for any flicker of the man she had loved, any hint of remorse. She found nothing, only the cold, hard eyes of a stranger. George, the kindly security guard, arrived a few minutes later, his face etched with confusion and pity. "Mrs. Hayes, is everything all right?" Bianca couldn't speak. She was numb, hollowed out. She allowed him to gently guide her towards the elevator, her body moving on autopilot. As the doors slid shut, she caught one last glimpse of her life, Liam and Sarah, standing together in the warm glow of the office, two predators celebrating their kill. She stumbled out of the skyscraper and into the relentless Seattle rain. She had no money, no phone, no keys. The clothes on her back were all she had left. The anniversary dinner she'd prepared was still in her car, a car that was no longer hers. She was alone, homeless, betrayed in the most brutal way imaginable. And she was pregnant with the child of the man who had just destroyed her. As the cold rain soaked her to the bone, a new terrifying reality set in. She had lost everything. The life she knew was over. And in the vast, indifferent city, not a single soul knew of the secret she carried, or the storm that had just consumed her world. The fight for survival had just begun. The first few weeks were a blur of primal survival. Bianca, the woman who once debated between charity galas, was now a ghost haunting the city's underbelly. She slept in bus shelters, the hard plastic benches a cruel mockery of her once plush king-sized bed. She ate from soup kitchens, the humility of it a constant burning shame. The faces around her were gaunt, etched with the harsh lines of poverty and despair, and she saw her own reflection in their hopeless eyes. Each day was a battle against hunger, cold, and the crushing weight of her new reality. The city she had once loved now felt like a labyrinth of painful memories. Every corner held a ghost of a life that was no longer hers. The cafe where Liam had proposed, the park where they used to walk their dog, the theater where they'd had their first date. She avoided these places like the plague, her grief too raw, too profound. But a more immediate, more terrifying grief was taking root. The stress, the malnutrition, the nights spent shivering in the damp Seattle air. It was all taking its toll. One grey morning, huddled in the relative privacy of a library bathroom, a sharp, cramping pain tore through her abdomen. It was followed by a wave of nausea, and then a horrifying rush of blood. There, in the sterile silence of a public restroom, she lost the baby. Her secret sunbeam, the last tiny piece of her old life, was extinguished. The physical pain was immense, but the emotional agony was a black hole that threatened to swallow her whole. She had lost her husband, her home, her fortune, and now her child. It was the ultimate, cruelest blow. For days, she was a hollow shell, a spectre of a woman wandering the streets with no purpose, no future. The thought of ending it all was a seductive whisper in the back of her mind. What was left to live for? It was in her darkest hour, sitting on a park bench as the sun set, that something shifted. She watched a young family playing nearby, their laughter echoing in the twilight. A father lifted his daughter onto his shoulders, the little girl squealing with delight. The sight didn't trigger the sharp pang of loss she expected. Instead, a different feeling began to smolder in the ashes of her despair rage. A cold, clear, all-consuming rage. They had taken everything from her. Liam and Sarah. They were living in her home, spending her money, thriving on the ruins of her life. They believed she was broken, destroyed, probably dead in a ditch somewhere. And in that moment, she made a vow. She would not be their victim. She would not be a tragic footnote in their story. She would survive. She would fight. And one day, she would have her revenge. That night, Bianca Hayes died. And from her ashes, a new woman began to rise. She started by selling the last remnant of her old life, her diamond wedding ring. She'd kept it hidden, a painful reminder of broken vows. She found a pawn shop in a seedy part of town and haggled for every last dollar, her voice steely, her eyes hard. It wasn't much, but it was enough for a room in a cheap boarding house and a few weeks of food. Her first job was washing dishes in a greasy diner, her hands raw and chapped from the hot water and harsh soap. The work was grueling, the pay abysmal. But it was honest. And it was hers. She worked double shifts, saving every penny, her anger fueling her like a furnace. She was no longer the soft, trusting woman who signed papers without reading them. She was sharp, focused, and relentless. With her small savings, she enrolled in night classes at a community college, studying business and finance. The subjects that had once bored her now fascinated her. She devoured textbooks, her mind a sponge, soaking up knowledge about corporate structures, hostile takeovers, and financial forensics. She was arming herself, forging the weapons she would one day use to reclaim what was hers. After earning her associate's degree with top honors, she got a low-level administrative job at a small, struggling tech firm. It was a world away from the glamour of Innovatech, but it was a start. Here she wasn't Mrs. Hayes, the socialite wife. She was just Bianca, the quiet, fiercely intelligent woman who worked harder than anyone else. Her ascent was meteoric. She didn't play office politics. She produced results. She saw inefficiencies no one else noticed, streamlined processes, and identified new market opportunities. Her bosses, impressed by her raw talent and ferocious work ethic, promoted her again and again. Within 2 years, she was a senior project manager. It was then that she was headhunted by Quantum Leap Dynamics, a major player in the tech industry and Innovatech's biggest rival. They offered her a position that came with a 6-figure salary and significant responsibility. It was her first taste of real power. At Quantum Leap, Bianca blossomed. She shed the last vestiges of her old self, cultivating a new persona. She was formidable, enigmatic, and utterly brilliant. She kept her personal life a fiercely guarded secret. No one knew where she came from, what drove her. They only knew her results. She spearheaded projects that brought the company hundreds of millions in revenue, earning a reputation as a strategic genius, a woman who could see 10 moves ahead on the corporate chessboard. 5 years. 5 years to the day since she had stumbled out into the rain, broken and destitute. Bianca now stood in her own penthouse apartment, one even more luxurious than the one she had lost. The view of the Seattle skyline was breathtaking. She was no longer the wife of a tech mogul. She was the mogul. She was the executive vice president of strategy at Quantum Leap Dynamics, one of the most powerful women in the industry. Her phone rang. It was her CEO, a man named David Chen. "Bianca," he said, his voice buzzing with excitement. "The board has approved your proposal. It's a go. Project Nightingale is officially a go." A slow, cold smile touched Bianca's lips. Excellent. She hung up and walked over to her desk, picking up a thick file. The cover read, "Project Nightingale Hostile Takeover Proposal. Target Company Innovatech Solutions." For the past year, Innovatech had been failing. Under Liam and Sarah's reckless and extravagant leadership, the company had squandered its initial success. They had made a series of disastrous business decisions driven by arrogance and greed. Their stock was plummeting, their investors were losing faith. They were vulnerable, ripe for the picking. Bianca had been watching, waiting patiently, gathering her forces. She had orchestrated this moment with the precision of a master tactician. She knew every weakness, every vulnerability, every skeleton in their closet. She had vanished from their lives 5 years ago, a ghost they had long since forgotten. But the ghost was about to return. And this time, she was the one in control. The ascent was complete. The collision was now inevitable. The news of the hostile takeover hit Innovatech Solutions like a tsunami. Panic rippled through the hallways. The company, once a beacon of innovation, was now a sinking ship, its captain and his first mate too busy plundering the cabins to notice the gaping hole in the hull. Liam Hayes, his charm worn thin by years of complacent leadership, scrambled to rally his board. But it was too late. Quantum Leap Dynamics' offer was too aggressive, their strategy too flawless. The shareholders, desperate to salvage their investments, jumped ship in droves. The takeover was swift and brutal. Within a week, it was a done deal. Innovatech Solutions, Liam's pride and joy, the company built on Bianca's stolen inheritance, now belonged to their biggest rival. An emergency all-hands board meeting was called, the purpose to meet the new leadership. The atmosphere in the 48th floor boardroom, the same room where Bianca's life had been shattered, was thick with tension and resentment. Liam sat at the head of the table, his face pale, his knuckles white as he gripped the armrests. Sarah sat beside him, her usual smugness replaced by a poorly concealed anxiety. Her expensive dress suddenly seemed too tight, her jewelry too gaudy. The other board members, a collection of grim-faced men and women, muttered amongst themselves their loyalty to Liam, evaporating with their stock options. "I don't understand how this happened," one of them grumbled. "Their strategy was airtight. It's like they knew every move we were going to make before we made it." "Who is behind this?" another asked. "Who is this mysterious EVP from Quantum Leap who orchestrated the whole damn thing?" Liam had no answers. He felt neutered, powerless. The company he had stolen was now being stolen from him, and he was utterly helpless to stop it. The boardroom doors swung open. David Chen, the CEO of Quantum Leap Dynamics, walked in, exuding an aura of calm authority. He was flanked by 2 associates. "Good morning, everyone," David said, his voice polite but firm. "I know this is a difficult transition, but I assure you we believe in the potential of this company. That's why we've put our best and brightest in charge of this merger." He stepped aside. "Allow me to introduce you to the new CEO of Innovatech Solutions." Time seemed to slow down. Through the open doors, a figure emerged. A woman. She was tall, dressed in an impeccably tailored navy blue power suit that screamed quiet confidence. Her dark hair was styled in a chic, severe bob. Her face was elegant, her expression unreadable, her eyes shielded by an icy calm. It was Bianca. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. Board members who had known her as the quiet, unassuming Mrs. Hayes stared their mouths agape. But their shock was nothing compared to the cataclysmic explosion that went off in the minds of Liam and Sarah. Liam shot to his feet, a strangled noise escaping his lips. His face drained of all color, leaving it a pasty, sickly white. He looked as if he had seen a ghost, and in a way he had. Sarah's reaction was even more visceral. Her perfectly manicured hand flew to her mouth, her eyes widening in sheer, unadulterated terror. The blood-red lipstick she wore stood out in stark contrast to her suddenly pale face. This was impossible. A nightmare. Bianca was supposed to be gone. A forgotten tragedy. Not this. This titan of industry standing before them. Bianca's gaze swept across the room, cool and appraising. She didn't acknowledge the shockwaves her presence had caused. She walked to the head of the table, her heels clicking softly on the polished floor, the sound echoing the ticking of a bomb. She placed her leather portfolio down on the exact spot where Sarah had so brazenly sat 5 years ago. Her eyes, cold and sharp as shards of glass, finally landed on Liam. She held his gaze for a long, torturous moment, letting him drown in the abyss of his own shock and guilt. Then she shifted her attention to Sarah, a flicker of something unidentifiable. Contempt, pity in their depths. "Good morning," Bianca said, her voice a low, melodic purr that sent a shiver down Liam's spine. It was her voice, but it was different. Deeper. Harder. Stripped of the warmth and affection he remembered. "For those of you who don't know me, my name is Bianca, and as of this morning I am your new Chief Executive Officer." Silence. A thick, suffocating silence. "There will be many changes in the coming weeks," she continued, her tone crisp and businesslike. "We will be conducting a complete operational and financial audit. We will be restructuring. We will be rebuilding this company from the ground up, based on principles of integrity and innovation principles that have been sorely lacking." Each word was a perfectly aimed dart hitting Liam and Sarah with pinpoint accuracy. Liam finally found his voice, though it was a weak, trembling imitation of his usual confident baritone. "Bianca, I don't understand. How—" Bianca turned her full attention to him, a faint, humorless smile touching her lips. "How I worked. I learned. I persevered. While you were playing house with my money, I was building an empire. This empire." She gestured around the room, a room that was now unequivocally hers. Sarah, recovering from her initial shock, found a sliver of her old audacity. "You can't do this," she hissed, her voice trembling with rage. "This company is Liam's." Bianca's smile vanished. Her eyes narrowed into dangerous slits. "This company was built on a foundation of lies and theft," she said, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "It was built on my inheritance. It was built on my trust. You and Liam were merely its corrupt caretakers. Your tenure is over." She turned to the rest of the stunned board members. "Mr. Hayes will be staying on," she announced, the statement dropping like a guillotine. "As Junior Vice President of Legacy Integration, he will report directly to me." It was a masterstroke of cruelty. She wasn't just firing him. She was demoting him, humiliating him, forcing him to witness her triumph from a position of utter subservience. He was no longer the king of his castle. He was a court jester in hers. As for Miss Jenkins, Bianca continued, her gaze falling on Sarah with chilling indifference. Your position as personal assistant is of course redundant. My own assistant will be starting tomorrow. Human Resources will have your severance package ready this afternoon. You have 1 hour to clear out your desk. The finality in her voice was absolute. Sarah stared at her, her face a maelstrom of hatred and disbelief. She opened her mouth to protest, to scream, to unleash the torrent of venom building inside her, but no words came out. She had been dismissed, erased. Just as she and Liam had erased Bianca 5 years ago. Bianca clapped her hands together, a sharp, decisive sound that broke the spell. Well then, let's get to work, shall we? The collision had happened. The game had been reset. And Bianca, the woman they had left with nothing, now had everything. She was their boss, their judge, and their jury. The trial was about to begin. The first week under Bianca's reign was a masterclass in psychological warfare. She moved into the CEO's office, her office, and had it completely redecorated. The ostentatious mahogany desk Liam had favored was replaced with a sleek, minimalist structure of glass and chrome. The gaudy abstract paintings Sarah had chosen were taken down the walls, now bare, save for a single-framed stock certificate, Quantum Leap Dynamics. It was a constant, silent reminder of who was in charge. Liam was a man adrift in a sea of his own making. He was relegated to a small, sterile office on a lower floor, a space that felt more like a prison cell than a workspace. The title Junior Vice President of Legacy Integration was a meaningless, humiliating invention. His tasks consisted of compiling old data reports and documenting past project leads, forcing him to relive the history of the company he had both built and destroyed. He was a ghost in his own machine, forced to watch as Bianca with surgical precision dismantled his legacy and built her own. His feelings were a toxic, confusing cocktail. There was the deep, gnawing regret, the ghost of the gentle, loving wife he had so cruelly discarded. He saw her in flashes the way Bianca's brow would furrow in concentration, a mannerism he dimly remembered. But that woman was gone. In her place was this formidable, untouchable powerhouse, and to his shame, he felt a new, twisted flicker of desire. The power, the confidence, the sheer, unadulterated strength she radiated was intoxicating. He had crushed the delicate flower, only to find it had regrown as a Venus flytrap, beautiful and deadly. Sarah, on the other hand, was consumed by a singular burning emotion, hatred. Being fired was a humiliation. Being dismissed so contemptuously by Bianca was an existential threat. Her life with Liam was built on the spoils of their victory over Bianca. Now the vanquished had returned as the conqueror, and Sarah's entire world was built on shifting sand. She didn't clear out her desk and leave quietly. She festered. Her severance package was generous, a final ironic twist of Bianca's knife, and she used that money not to move on, but to plot. She spent her days in expensive coffee shops, her phone glued to her ear, calling old contacts from Innovatech, fishing for gossip, for any scrap of information she could use against Bianca. "She's a monster," Sarah would hiss into the phone to a former colleague. "Cold, calculating. You have to be careful. There's something not right about her. Where did she even come from 5 years? and she just appears out of nowhere with all this power. It's suspicious." Her whispers began to spread like a virus through the company's servers. Rumors circulated in hushed tones by the water cooler and in private chat messages. She must have a rich benefactor. Maybe she blackmailed her way to the top. No one gets that successful that fast on their own. Sarah was planting seeds of doubt, trying to poison the well of Bianca's authority. She was convinced there had to be a secret, a weakness, a dirty little scandal she could expose to bring the whole edifice crashing down. Bianca was not oblivious to the whispers. She had anticipated them. But she didn't react. She remained focused, impassive, her gaze fixed on her objective, the complete overhaul of Innovatech. She worked tirelessly, her days a blur of meetings, financial analyses, and strategic planning sessions. In this hostile new environment, however, she found an unexpected ally. His name was Marcus Thorne. He was in his late 50s, the chief financial officer, and one of the few board members who had been with Innovatech from its inception. He was a man of quiet integrity, who had been increasingly disgusted by Liam and Sarah's reckless management. He had watched them drive the company he loved into the ground, and had felt powerless to stop it. Marcus saw through Sarah's smear campaign immediately. More importantly, he saw the brilliance in Bianca. He was mesmerized by her sharp intellect, her deep understanding of the market, and her unwavering vision. One evening, he found her working late, the city lights twinkling behind her in the vast expanse of her office window. "You should go home, you know," he said gently, standing in the doorway. "The company won't collapse if you take a few hours off." Bianca looked up from a spreadsheet, a faint, tired smile touching her lips. "There's a lot to be done, Marcus. You're doing a remarkable job," he said, walking into the room. "What you've accomplished in a matter of weeks is extraordinary." He paused, then decided to take a risk. "I was there, you know, at the beginning. I knew you and Liam when you first started this. I remember your passion, your belief." Bianca's mask of composure slipped for just a fraction of a second. A flicker of old pain crossed her features before she quickly suppressed it. "That was a long time ago," she said quietly. "I also know what they did to you was wrong." Marcus continued, his voice low and sincere. "I never approved of Sarah, or the way Liam changed. The rumors they're spreading now, it's despicable." Bianca looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw a genuine kindness in his eyes, a loyalty not to the old regime or the new, but to the company itself, to what was right. "Thank you, Marcus," she said, the words carrying a weight that went far beyond simple politeness. "It means a lot to hear you say that." "I want you to know you have my full support," he said. "Whatever you need. This company deserves a second chance, and you are the one to give it that." It was a small moment, but a significant one. Bianca had spent 5 years building walls around herself, trusting no one. Marcus's simple act of decency was the first crack in that fortress. She now had an ally, someone on the inside who saw her not just as a ruthless corporate raider, but as a true leader. Meanwhile, Sarah's desperation grew. Her whispers weren't having the desired effect. Bianca's position seemed unassailable. So she escalated her scheme. She hired a private investigator, a shady character named Rick, to dig into Bianca's past. "I want everything," Sarah told him, her voice hard as nails as they met in a dimly lit bar. For 5 years, this woman was off the grid. Find out where she was, who she was with, what she was doing. There has to be something, A messy divorce, a lawsuit, a criminal record. Something I can use to destroy her. Rick, a man who reveled in the dirt of other people's lives, smiled. Don't you worry, Miss Jenkins. Everyone has secrets. It's just a matter of finding them. The scheme was in motion. As Bianca worked to rebuild a company, Sarah worked to tear down its leader. And Liam, trapped between the woman he had wronged and the woman who had helped him do it, was a ticking time bomb. His guilt and resentment, a volatile combination waiting for a spark. The whispers were about to become a storm. The internal audit initiated by Bianca and spearheaded by Marcus Thorne began to yield its toxic fruit. It started as a trickle, then became a flood. The deeper Marcus and his team of forensic accountants dug into Innovatech's finances from the past 5 years, the more a disturbing picture of gross negligence and systematic fraud emerged. It was all there, hidden in plain sight, within padded expense reports, dummy corporations, and inflated invoices. Lavish business trips for Liam and Sarah to Bali and the French Riviera. Company funds used for down payments on luxury cars and designer wardrobes. Consulting fees paid to a shell company whose sole director was Sarah's cousin. It was a cesspool of greed and corruption, a testament to their arrogance. They had treated the company's coffers as their personal piggy bank, so certain they would never be held accountable. Marcus would bring the findings to Bianca's office each evening, his face a mixture of grim satisfaction and professional outrage. "It's worse than we thought," he said one night, laying out a file thick with incriminating documents on her glass desk. "They didn't just mismanage the company. They actively embezzled from it. We're talking millions, Bianca. Millions of dollars." Bianca examined the evidence, her expression a mask of cold fury. Each document was a fresh stab of betrayal, a new confirmation of the depth of their depravity. This wasn't just about a broken heart anymore. This was a criminal conspiracy. They hadn't just thrown her out. They had robbed her, the shareholders, and the employees blind. As the evidence mounted, the pressure on Liam began to crack his carefully constructed composure. He saw Marcus's team hauling boxes of financial records from the archives. He saw stern-faced accountants interviewing his former subordinates. The walls were closing in, and the stench of his own guilt was becoming unbearable. He was a passenger on a train he couldn't stop heading straight for a cliff. His relationship with Sarah, already strained by Bianca's return, fractured completely. Their panicked phone calls devolved into bitter, accusatory shouting matches. "This is your fault," Liam would yell into his phone, hiding in a stairwell. "You're spending your ridiculous demands. You were too greedy." "My fault," Sarah would shriek back. "You were the one signing the checks, you coward. You were so desperate to keep me happy, you would have signed anything." They were like two rats trapped in a cage, turning on each other as the water level rose. The love they had once professed was exposed for what it was, a transactional alliance of convenience and mutual greed. While the financial noose tightened, Sarah's private investigator was hitting a wall. Rick the PI was good at his job, but Bianca had covered her tracks with meticulous care. For 5 years, she had lived a quiet, almost monastic life. She had no debts, no lawsuits, no social media presence. Her life was a closed book. "I'm telling you, Miss Jenkins, there's nothing here," Rick reported back to a frantic Sarah. "The woman lived like a nun, worked, studied, slept. That's it. She paid her rent on time, her taxes were immaculate. There's no dirt to dig." "That's impossible," Sarah screeched, pacing her living room, a room paid for with stolen money. "Look harder. Check hospital records, police reports. Something must have happened." Her desperation led Rick to a new, darker path. Hospital records. He used a series of illegal pretexts and bribes to access sealed medical files from Seattle General Hospital, and there he found it. A record from 5 years ago. An emergency admission for a Jane Doe found collapsed. The diagnosis: severe emotional distress, malnutrition, and a spontaneous abortion. A miscarriage. Rick felt a slimy thrill of victory. This was it. The dirt Sarah wanted. He called her immediately. "I've got something," he said, his voice greasy with triumph. "Something big." He told her everything. A slow, venomous smile spread across Sarah's face. This was better than a lawsuit. Better than a criminal record. This was personal. This was pain. This was a weapon she could use to shatter Bianca's icy composure and expose her to the world not as a powerful CEO, but as a damaged, tragic victim. That evening, Bianca was working late with Marcus, finalizing the audit report. The sheer scale of the fraud was staggering. As they sat in the quiet of her office, Marcus could see the toll the past few weeks had taken on her. The armor of the powerful CEO was still in place, but he could see the fatigue in her eyes, the ghost of an old sadness that never quite left her. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. Bianca looked out at the city lights, her reflection a faint silhouette against the glass. "They didn't just steal money, Marcus," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "They stole years of my life. They took a woman who believed in love and trust, and they broke her." She paused, taking a shaky breath. She had never spoken of this to anyone. But in the quiet trust she had built with Marcus, the words came tumbling out. "I was pregnant when they threw me out, Marcus. I was carrying Liam's child." Marcus stared at her, his heart clenching with a profound sorrow and a fresh wave of fury towards Liam and Sarah. "Bianca, I had no idea. I lost the baby." She continued, her voice thick with unshed tears. "The stress, everything. I lost him. I was alone." In that moment, she wasn't the formidable CEO of Quantum Leap Dynamics. She was just Bianca, a woman sharing a story of unimaginable pain. It was a moment of pure, raw vulnerability, a glimpse into the furnace that had forged her strength. "They tried to erase me," she said, her voice regaining its steel. "They thought I would just disappear. But you can't erase something that's been burned into you. You can only use the fire to reforge yourself." As she spoke those words, an email landed in her inbox. The subject line was a single word: "Remember." It was from an anonymous address. Attached was a single file, a scanned document, a hospital record from 5 years ago. Her hospital record, under the name Jane Doe. Below the image was a single line of text: "The world would be very interested to hear the tragic story of the barren CEO. Resign now, or everyone will know your secret." The unraveling was complete. Sarah had found her weapon. The financial audit was about to expose their crimes, but Sarah had just launched her own preemptive strike, aimed directly at Bianca's heart. The final confrontation was no longer just about business. It had become a war with no rules. The blackmail email was a declaration of war. For a moment, seeing the stark black and white of the hospital record on her screen, Bianca felt the icy grip of that old trauma. The shame, the pain, the loneliness of that sterile bathroom floor. It all came rushing back. Sarah's attack was as cruel as it was calculated, designed to cripple her with the weight of her own tragedy. Sarah believed this secret was Bianca's greatest weakness. She was about to find out it had become her greatest strength. Instead of shattering, Bianca felt a surge of cold, righteous fury. They had taken her child from her. Now they were trying to use that loss to silence her. They had crossed the final line. There would be no more quiet maneuvers, no more strategic chess moves. It was time to burn their world to the ground. She looked at Marcus, her eyes blazing with a fire he had never seen before. "She's made her move," Bianca said, her voice deceptively calm. "Now I'll make mine." She turned to her computer and began typing. "Call an emergency meeting of the board of directors, full attendance mandatory, and make sure Liam Hayes is there. Tell him his future depends on it." The next morning, the 48th floor boardroom was once again filled with an anxious energy. The board members, already reeling from the rumors of the audit, now sensed a final dramatic reckoning was at hand. Liam stood at the back of the room, looking haggard and drawn. He had no idea what this meeting was about, but he felt a sense of impending doom, a feeling that his life was about to be irrevocably altered. The doors opened, and Bianca strode in. She was not wearing her usual power suit. Today she was dressed in a simple, elegant black dress. There was no pretense, no armor, just a woman ready to face her demons. She didn't take her seat at the head of the table. Instead, she stood before them, a lone figure against the backdrop of the Seattle skyline. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice." She began, her voice clear and steady, resonating with an unnerving calm. "For the past several weeks, Mr. Thorne and his team have been conducting a thorough financial audit of this company's activities over the last 5 years. I have the results here." She gestured to a thick binder on the table, which Marcus solemnly opened. "The audit has uncovered a pattern of systematic fraud, embezzlement, and criminal conspiracy," Bianca announced, her eyes scanning the faces of the board members. "Funds in excess of $7 million have been illegally diverted from this company for personal use." A wave of shocked murmurs swept through the room. These funds were used to finance a lifestyle of obscene luxury by the two individuals this board entrusted with the company's leadership, Liam Hayes and Sarah Jenkins. Liam flinched as if he'd been struck. All eyes in the room turned to him, a sea of accusatory glares. "The evidence is irrefutable," Bianca continued, her voice like a judge's gavel. "We have bank statements, falsified invoices, testimony from coerced employees, and a clear money trail leading from Innovatech's accounts directly to shell corporations controlled by Ms. Jenkins and Mr. Hayes." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "The district attorney's office has been notified. A criminal investigation is already underway." This was it. The public disgrace, the legal ruin. Liam felt the floor give way beneath him. He was finished. But Bianca wasn't done. The financial execution was complete. Now came the personal one. "This is a story of corporate greed," she said, her voice softening slightly, drawing them in. "But it is also a personal story. It's my story. And I believe you all deserve to know the whole truth." She looked directly at Liam, her gaze pinning him in place. 5 years ago, I was not just Liam's wife. I was his partner. The seed money for this company, the money that gave him his start, came from my inheritance. I gave him everything I had, because I believed in him. She began to pace slowly, her voice filled with a raw, captivating emotion. "On the night of our 5th wedding anniversary, I came to this very office to surprise him, and I found him with his assistant, Sarah Jenkins, here on that desk." The board members stared, utterly engrossed. This was no longer a business meeting. It was a confession, a tragedy unfolding before their eyes. "He told me he was in love with her," Bianca said, her voice cracking, for the first time, a sliver of the old pain showing through. And then he informed me that he had tricked me into signing away my home, my assets and my shares in this company. He and Ms. Jenkins threw me out of this building with nothing but the clothes on my back. Liam squeezed his eyes shut, unable to bear the weight of her testimony, the truth of his own monstrous actions laid bare. They left me homeless, penniless. Bianca's voice grew stronger, fueled by the memory. But they took more than my money. Last night I received a blackmail threat, an attempt to force my resignation. They threatened to expose a secret I have held for 5 years, a secret they clearly see as a source of shame. She stopped pacing and stood perfectly still, her presence commanding the entire room. When Liam Hayes threw me onto the street, she said, her voice ringing with defiance, I was 2 months pregnant with his child. A collective horrified gasp filled the silence. Liam's head snapped up, his eyes wide, with a dawning, sickening understanding. Pregnant. She had been pregnant. The thought, the reality of it, was a physical blow, knocking the last of the air from his lungs. I lost the baby, Bianca stated, her voice devoid of self-pity, filled only with a terrible, steely strength. I lost our child because of the stress and the trauma and the poverty they forced upon me. I lost him alone on the floor of a public bathroom. Tears were now openly streaming down the faces of several board members. The air was thick with a mixture of pity for Bianca and utter revulsion for Liam. This is the dirt they tried to use against me, Bianca said, her eyes locking with Liam's. The loss of my son. They believe it is my weakness, my shame. They are wrong. It is the bedrock on which I have rebuilt my life. It is the fire that fuels me. It is the memory of what I survived that makes me completely, utterly unbreakable. She picked up the audit binder. You did not just betray a wife, Liam. You destroyed a family. You didn't just steal from a company. You stole a future from your own child. She walked over to him, her steps measured and deliberate. He shrank back in his chair, a pathetic, broken man. She dropped the heavy binder on the table in front of him. The sound here echoed like a jail door slamming shut. Your corporate crimes will be handled by the courts, she said, her voice dropping to a low, intense whisper for his ears only. But this is between you and whatever is left of your soul. You have to live with this. Every day for the rest of your life, you will remember the son you never knew. That will be your prison. Without another word, she turned her back on him and faced the stunned, silent board. The confrontation was over. She had not only exposed his crimes, she had stripped him of his humanity, leaving him with nothing but the ashes of his guilt. She had taken their ugliest weapon and turned it into her coronation. The aftermath was swift. With the confrontation having been so absolute, there was no defense for Liam and Sarah. They were promptly arrested, and their sensational trial for fraud and embezzlement became a public spectacle. Convicted and disgraced, their downfall was absolute. Liam, haunted by the spectre of his unborn son, was left a hollow man already serving a life sentence in a prison of his own making. In the ensuing turmoil at Innovatech Solutions, Bianca was a pillar of strength. Shunning celebration, she focused only on the work to be done. She called an all-hands meeting, facing a workforce fearful and uncertain about the future of the scandal-scarred company. Standing before them not as a conqueror, but as a leader, she addressed the betrayal head-on. That era of greed and lies is over, she declared, her voice calm but firm. She outlined a new vision built on a foundation of integrity, transparency, and relentless innovation. She announced profit-sharing initiatives and better benefits, committing to a culture that valued its employees above all. "I know what it feels like to have your trust broken," she said, her sincerity palpable. "This company's greatest asset is not its market share. It is you." As she spoke, the fear in the room melted away, replaced by a growing sense of hope. When she finished, a single person, Marcus Thorne, began to clap. He was joined by another, and then the entire auditorium erupted in a thunderous, heartfelt ovation, a vote of confidence for their new leader. Bianca stood on the stage, a faint, genuine smile on her face, and for the first time in 5 years, she felt a sense of peace. The ghosts of the past were finally quiet. She had not just reclaimed what was stolen, she had transformed it. Her revenge was not the destruction of her enemies, but the creation of her own new and brilliant legacy. So ends the incredible saga of Bianca Hayes, a story that proves the deepest betrayals can forge the strongest souls. She was pushed from the highest tower of love and trust, left with nothing but the ashes of a life and the secret sorrow of a lost child. But from those ashes, she didn't just rise. She rebuilt an empire and served justice not with hatred, but with undeniable success. Her story is a powerful reminder that our past does not have to be our prison. Your greatest pain can be repurposed into your greatest power, and the ultimate revenge is not sinking to their level, but building a life so magnificent they can only watch in awe. If Bianca's journey from heartbreak to head of the boardroom moved you, please show your support by hitting that like button, sharing this story with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribing for more tales of incredible resilience and ultimate triumph.
Mistress mocks poor ex-wife for marrying a beggar. Turns out he's the millionaire CEO. Have you ever witnessed a situation where someone's arrogance blinds them, only to have fate unveil a startling twist? In this epic tale of heartbreak, betrayal, second chances, and unexpected fortunes, you'll see how a humble man is dismissed as a beggar, a woman clings to her dignity despite mockery, and a mistress flaunts her perceived victory. But beneath the surface, secrets ripple, and a startling revelation changes everything. Get ready to experience intense confrontations, forbidden passions, and the sweet taste of well-deserved comeuppance. This story promises tears, laughter, triumph, and poetic justice. Ready yourself for a real lifestyle drama that defies all expectations. Isabella Santos clutched her phone as she hovered outside the private dining room of the luxurious Monarch Hotel. Her heart hammered, a dissonant echo, matching the rain pounding on the tinted skylight above. She had come here tonight for one last chance to save her marriage, her now estranged husband. Adrian Santos had requested a meeting to talk about final terms. That phrasing alone curdled her blood. She knew it meant something far more conclusive than a mere separation. Adrian's assistant had texted Isabella the address and insisted she arrive on time. She followed instructions because, somewhere deep in her heart, she clung to the small possibility that Adrian might be reconsidering their relationship. They had only been married for 3 years. But 3 years was long enough for heartbreak to wrap around Isabella's life and squeeze tight. Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the heavy doors and stepped into the private dining suite. Candlelight flickered against the walls, illuminating 2 figures seated at a table draped in pristine white linen. Adrian perched at the edge of his seat, sporting an impeccable charcoal suit and exuding the cool confidence of a man in power typical for him. Given his partnership at Santiago and Davies, one of Los Angeles' most esteemed law firms. But Isabella's gaze immediately shifted to the woman next to Adrian. That woman's name was Lacey Kavanaugh, whom Isabella had once considered a friend, or at least a close acquaintance in their social circle. Lacey was also the rumoured mistress. Lacey's lips curved into a smirk that only grew more pronounced as Isabella approached. The tension in the room was electric, fueling the swirl of emotions building in Isabella's chest. For a moment, a rush of painful memories flooded her mind the day she first suspected the affair. The flickers of text messages on Adrian's phone, the subtle changes in his routine. Adrian cleared his throat. "Isabella, thank you for coming." His voice was measured, giving nothing away. "Don't thank me," Isabella replied, eyes darting from him to Lacey, carefully ignoring the latter's mocking expression. "You said you had some final things you wanted to settle." With a swift gesture, Adrian placed a brown envelope on the table. He slid it across the surface in Isabella's direction. "It's all there. Divorce papers. The terms are fair." Isabella's breath caught in her throat. She had braced herself for the blow, but seeing those documents made reality land like a punch to the gut. That single envelope might as well have been a wrecking ball swinging through every dream she had cherished. She had tried to salvage things. She'd tried counseling, compromise, and calm conversations. But in the end, it appeared Adrian was done. She forced herself to remain composed, refusing to let tears free while Lacey watched, predatory satisfaction glinting in her eyes. Carefully, Isabella picked up the envelope and opened it. She scanned the paperwork, noticing how cleanly it was laid out. Adrian had meticulously planned this. Legally, he offered what seemed reasonable, but there was a cold, clinical detachment to it. No mention of alimony, only a one-time lump sum that felt more like hush money than a genuine attempt to help her land on her feet. Lacey faked a sympathetic sigh. "It's only fair, Bella," she said, using the diminutive name that once indicated friendship. "Adrian wants you to have enough to restart your life. Don't be ungrateful." Isabella almost laughed at the irony, Lacey telling her not to be ungrateful. Standing there, the mistress turned fiancé at least. That was the rumour swirling in their old circles. Isabella's eyes narrowed. She spoke directly to Adrian, ignoring Lacey. "Is this what our marriage boils down to? An envelope with a settlement you decided unilaterally? No discussion, no discussion." Adrian's eyebrows lifted condescendingly. "We've done enough talking. Our marriage has been over for a while. I'm just making it official." A wave of anger burned through Isabella's veins. She wanted to tear up the papers, scream, or lash out, but her dignity took the wheel. She folded the documents neatly and tucked them into her bag. With a calm she barely felt, she said, "I will have my attorney look it over. If there are no glaring issues, I'll sign." For a split second, a flicker of something, maybe regret, passed through Adrian's eyes. But it was too fleeting to hold any weight. He simply shrugged. "Suit yourself." Lacey's triumphant grin glowed. She lifted her wineglass. "Here's to new beginnings," she cooed, mocking with that honey-laced voice. Isabella turned on her heel and left the room, her posture stiff. The final blow had been delivered. She was leaving with a marriage in shambles and her confidence battered, but at least she had her pride. If Adrian thought a manila envelope would kill her spirit, then he didn't know her at all. That night, Isabella crashed at her best friend Tessa Morgan's one-bedroom apartment in downtown Latssa, and Isabella had known each other since high school. Even though Tessa's tiny living space was the antithesis of the opulent mansion Isabella had shared with Adrian, here she found warmth and unconditional support. Tessa handed her a mug of steaming chamomile tea. "So that's it then?" she asked quietly. Isabella nodded, tears threatening to escape. "He's filed. He offered a settlement. No spousal support, just a buyout, and he was there with Lacey at the meeting." Tessa's eyes ignited with anger. What a creep. And what a piece of work she is. Didn't she used to hang around you, copying your style, your hair routine, everything? Isabella managed a half laugh. Yes, she was like a little sister who tried to emulate everything I did. Then she turned around and stabbed me in the back. They fell into a somber silence. Outside, traffic roared, and neon lights glowed against the black sky. Finally, Tessa spoke. "What do you want to do next?" The question rattled Isabella. She realized she had no plan. For years, her life revolved around Adrian's schedule, his firm's socials, his family's gatherings. She had a college degree in journalism, but hadn't pursued a career since Adrian insisted she concentrate on charity work and be available for his corporate engagements. Now, confronted with an abrupt new reality, she felt like a ship with no anchor. "I don't know," she admitted. "I might have to get a job. Adrian's settlement might look decent on paper, but I'm not sure how long it'll last. My family's in Florida, but I don't want to run back there with my tail between my legs. I have my pride." Tessa placed a reassuring hand on Isabella's shoulder. "Stay with me as long as you need. I know it's cramped, but I'll support you." Isabella felt a rush of gratitude. In a single night, her life had changed drastically, but at least Tessa's friendship was a constant. Outside, the wind howled a reminder that storms can both destroy and cleanse. Maybe this was the beginning of her transformation. Days turned to weeks. Isabella found herself grappling with endless paperwork, arguments with Adrian's lawyers, and the general upheaval of separating her life from his. She vacated their mansion, leaving behind marble floors and crystal chandeliers for the humble warmth of Tessa's couch. The emotional toll weighed on her, but her determination grew stronger every day. In an attempt to regain some control of her life, Isabella applied for various positions, administrative assistant roles, junior PR roles, even copywriting. But time and again, she discovered that the glamorous circle she once inhabited overshadowed her limited professional experience. One afternoon, after another round of rejections, Isabella found herself at a cozy cafe near Tessa's apartment. She scrolled through job listings with mounting frustration. Suddenly, a familiar voice cut through her reverie. "Isabella." She looked up to see Daniel Reyes, an old college acquaintance. They had taken a journalism elective together, and she remembered him as the quiet guy at the back of the classroom who always wrote top-tier features on local community heroes. She also recalled that after graduation, he had landed a small editorial position for a local newspaper, the LA Gazette. "Daniel!" she exclaimed, standing to give him a brief hug. A wave of comfort and nostalgia swept over her. Back in college, she'd always admired his dedication and ambition. He smiled warmly, noticing her laptop and the job listings on the screen. "Job hunting?" A grimace twisted her lips. "Yes, I'm going through some major life changes." Daniel nodded with understanding instead of prying. "I get it. Times are tough. Actually, I remember you always had a knack for telling stories in our journalism class. Ever thought of picking that up again?" Isabella shrugged. "I considered it, but..." He held up a hand. "If you're serious, the LA Gazette is looking for freelancers who can cover human interest stories. It's not a full-time gig, but it pays per article. Want me to put in a good word?" Grateful tears pricked at her eyes, but she blinked them away. "I'd really appreciate that, Daniel. Thank you." He scribbled his number on a napkin. "Send me your resume and some writing samples. I'll forward them to my editor. And, hey, let me buy you a latte. Catch up a bit." As they chatted and laughed over coffee, Isabella felt a glimmer of hope. Meeting Daniel felt like a sign, the first step toward rebuilding her life on her own terms. A week later, Isabella strolled into the headquarters of the LA Gazette, a modest yet bustling office in an older downtown building. She'd been invited for an informal chat with the editorial team. The elevator rattled as it ascended, but her heart hammered more violently than any mechanical contraption. Emerging on the 10th floor, she was greeted by a flurry of activity phones ringing, reporters rushing back and forth, the strong smell of freshly brewed coffee. Nostalgia for her college days in journalism struck her. Even in the chaos, there was an energy that stirred her soul. Daniel hurried over, guiding her through the maze of desks to a corner office with the glass door labeled Editor-in-Chief, Diane Whitfield. Inside sat Diane, a poised woman in her 50s, with short, salt and pepper hair and keen eyes that surveyed Isabella carefully. "I've seen your samples," Diane said without preamble. "You have a flair for narrative storytelling." Isabella fought the urge to blush. "Thank you. I'm still finding my footing, but I love writing." Diane scanned a file on her desk. "Daniel mentioned your personal story. Frankly, we're looking for someone to breathe life into local stories, to capture the everyday struggles and triumphs that big publications ignore. You'd start as a freelancer. We pay per piece, no benefits, but it's a foot in the door." A wave of relief swept over Isabella. It wasn't a glamour job, but it was hers if she wanted it. She could start piecing her life back together. She nodded. "I'll take it. Thank you." Diane extended a hand. "Welcome aboard." Outside the office, Daniel greeted her with an encouraging grin. "Congrats, new co-worker. Let's celebrate with lunch." They walked down the street to a tiny food truck that served the best Korean tacos in LA. While they waited in line, Isabella found herself opening up about her divorce and the humiliation from Adrian and Lacey. Daniel listened intently, his expression growing dark when she mentioned the cruelty involved. "I had no idea you were going through all that, but I can see your strength, Isabella. This job isn't much, but it could lead to bigger opportunities." She smiled gratefully. "I know. I just want a chance to stand on my own 2 feet again." They ate their tacos, chatting about old college memories, favorite professors, and how the world had changed in the last few years. In that moment, Isabella felt the seed of a new beginning. She had found a purpose. She would focus on telling the stories of regular people, shining a light on their resilience. She would also reclaim her own resilience along the way. 2 months into freelancing for the LA Gazette, Isabella was assigned a human interest piece on a homeless shelter called the Safe Harbor Project. She didn't realize that this assignment would become the catalyst for a life-altering encounter. The Safe Harbor Project was located in a run-down neighborhood near East LA. In front of the shelter, volunteers were handing out warm meals. The hum of conversation, the smell of cooking, and the sense of camaraderie enveloped her. People were battered by circumstance, but there was a generosity in the air that moved her. As Isabella interviewed staff and volunteers, a tall man around her age caught her eye. He was wearing a worn-out hoodie and helping direct incoming cars to the parking lot, volunteer vehicles, donation trucks, etc. He moved quietly, but the staff seemed to treat him with a casual respect. While scribbling in her notepad, Isabella overheard 2 staffers whispering, "That's Caleb. So dedicated. He comes here every single day. I heard he lost everything but refused to give up volunteering. Guy's an angel." Isabella's curiosity piqued. Approaching him with a friendly smile, she asked, "You work here?" "I'm Isabella Santos, doing a story for the LA Gazette." His brown eyes held a quiet kindness. "I volunteer here," he corrected gently. "Name's Caleb Bradford." They shook hands. His grip was firm yet warm, an unexpected comfort. His face was weathered by stress, or maybe heartbreak, but he carried himself with surprising dignity. "I'd love to hear your story," Isabella said. "Why you volunteer and what keeps you coming back?" He shrugged, looking slightly uncomfortable with the spotlight. "There's not much to tell. I just believe in helping. I know what it's like to have nowhere else to go. That simple statement tugged at her heartstrings. He spoke without self-pity, as if his struggles were ordinary. Determined to include his perspective in her article, she pressed gently, "Would you mind giving me a short interview?" He hesitated, then finally nodded. They sat on a bench behind the shelter, out of earshot of the busy crowd. Over the course of half an hour, Caleb spoke about once having a job and a life, only for things to fall apart due to financial issues and personal loss. He offered minimal details, and she sensed he was holding back, but the sincerity in his voice was undeniable. As they parted ways, Isabella thanked him for his time. A strange sense of kinship sparked within her, as though they were two people who had lost everything but were working to reclaim their lives. That night, Isabella wrote her piece, feeling an odd mix of warmth and sadness about Caleb's quiet resilience. Isabella's article about the Safe Harbor Project was published a week later. To her surprise and delight, it garnered more attention than she anticipated. Readers were moved by Caleb's story in particular, empathizing with a person who had lost his bearings yet refused to give up on others. In the following days, the shelter received more donations, and the LA Gazette even asked Isabella for a follow-up article. By happenstance, as she scrolled social media, she noticed a comment from someone named Alexa Bradford praising the piece and mentioning Caleb's unwavering commitment. Isabella wondered if Alexa was a family member or close friend. She considered reaching out but hesitated. She didn't want to pry. One afternoon, while finishing an assignment in the Gazette's open concept office, she felt her phone vibrate. It was an unknown number. The text read, "Hey, it's Caleb from Safe Harbor. Saw your article. Thank you for shining a light on the shelter. Would you mind meeting for coffee?" Her heart did a small flip. She typed back, "Of course. I'm free this Thursday at 3 p.m. "The cafe near the Gazette building okay?" He agreed, and that was that. On Thursday, she walked into the cafe and spotted him near the window, nursing a coffee. He wore slightly nicer clothes this time, clean jeans, a simple black T-shirt, still modest, but it didn't look like second-hand rummage. His eyes lit up when he saw her. "Isabella, I really wanted to thank you. Because of your article, we've got an extra funding and volunteers." She smiled, gesturing at the seat across from him. "I'm glad. You guys deserve the support." He reached into a small bag. "I don't have much, but I bought this for you." He handed her a new leather-bound notebook. "Saw the old one you carry. Thought a fresh start might need a fresh notebook." Tears threatened to form. No one had been that thoughtful in a long time. "Thank you." "This is perfect," she said, her voice wavering. A comfortable silence settled between them before he spoke again. "I've been meaning to mention, if you want more content for a follow-up, there are so many people at Safe Harbor with incredible stories. I can introduce you." She found herself nodding eagerly. "I'd love that." But the journalist in her also had questions. There was a mystery around Caleb. "I was curious. You said you lost everything. Do you mind telling me more?" He tensed for a moment, gaze darting to the bustling sidewalk outside. "It's complicated. I was in business. A venture went sour, and it cost me. I've been lying low, trying to figure out my next steps." Isabella noticed how carefully he chose his words. She let it drop for now, not wanting to push him. They continued sipping coffee, discussing lighter topics. But in the back of her mind, a curiosity took root. There was more to Caleb's story than he was letting on. Meanwhile, Isabella's personal life was still entwined in the mess of her divorce. One day, she received a text from Adrian's lawyer demanding a face-to-face meeting to finalize settlement details. Reluctantly, she agreed to meet at her old home, the mansion she once shared with Adrian. His lawyer claimed it was the most convenient location. Arriving there felt like a sucker punch. Memories lurked in every corner. Her wedding day in the garden, countless parties in the grand foyer. whispering sweet nothings in the bedroom. Now, everything about that place felt hollow. Adrian greeted her in the foyer with a stiff nod. Lacey lounged on the couch, flipping through a glossy fashion magazine, her contemptuous gaze locked on Isabella. "I see you haven't upgraded your wardrobe, Bella," she sneered, taking in Isabella's modest blouse and skirt. Isabella ignored the dig. She was here for business, not petty bickering. Adrian's lawyer, Mr. Caldwell, laid out the final settlement documents on the mahogany desk. "Miss S. Santos, well, Miss Santos, as soon as the divorce is final, this is our last proposed amount." Isabella scanned the figure. It was barely more than the initial offer. Her attorney, who accompanied her, arched an eyebrow. "My client has repeatedly requested more equitable terms." A condescending laugh came from Lacey. "Equitable? Adrian earned that money, not Isabella. She barely even worked." Though her cheeks flamed, Isabella breathed steadily. She was determined not to show weakness. "I gave up my career and supported Adrian in every aspect. That's work too." Adrian shot her an icy look. "You'll be fine with this settlement. Don't drag this out just to squeeze me dry." She realized he had no shame for his betrayal. He saw her as a leech on his life. Fine, she thought, let him keep his illusions. "If you say so," Isabella replied softly. Then she signed the papers. It was a crushing moment, scrawling her name to finalize the end of her marriage. But there was also a sense of liberation. She noticed Lacey's smug grin as she finished signing. Isabella locked eyes with her and let a slow smile cross her lips. Adrian might have won the material war, but someday life would serve them the reckoning they deserved. She believed in karma somewhere down the line. It would find them. In the following weeks, Isabella buried herself in writing stories for the Gazette. Her pieces on safe harbor continued to draw interest. Every time she visited the shelter, she ran into Caleb, who was always patient, always dedicated. With each interaction, her respect and affection for him grew. One crisp Saturday morning, Caleb invited her to join a group of volunteers visiting a senior center. They arrived in an old van loaded with donated blankets and board games. Throughout the day, Isabella watched as Caleb engaged the seniors in heartfelt conversations, making each one feel valued. His quiet compassion tugged at her heart. Afterward, they ended up at a rundown but charming diner nearby. Over plates of blueberry pancakes and hot coffee, they finally ventured into personal territory. Caleb opened up a fraction more. "You know, when I was younger, I dreamed of being a big shot in the tech industry. I actually got my start after college working at a startup. For a while, we were doing well. Then some poor decisions from the leadership, well, everything fell apart." He stirred his coffee absent-mindedly. "I was left with a mountain of debt, no safety net." Isabella nodded empathetically. "That must have been devastating." He shrugged. "I guess it's how you grow. When you have nothing, you learn to appreciate everything." Pausing, he changed the subject. "What about you? You're always at the shelter or writing for the Gazette. Don't you ever get tired?" She smiled wryly. "After my divorce, I felt worthless. Writing these stories, meeting people who still find hope in dark places, it reminds me that I can do better, be better." Their conversation meandered for hours, covering childhood memories, random likes and dislikes. She learned that Caleb was a whiz at chess, that he loved classical music, and that he found solace in nature. She, in turn, revealed her love for stargazing, her regret over not pursuing journalism sooner, and her quiet dream of one day traveling to Europe to write a personal memoir. By the time they finished their meal, a soft warmth had blossomed between them. Not quite romantic yet, but definitely something deeper than casual friendship. They walked out of the diner, the sky tinged with the orange glow of sunset. Parting ways, he hesitated, then reached out to gently squeeze her hand. It was a small gesture, but it sent a tremor of emotion through Isabella's heart. She squeezed back, a silent acknowledgement that they were both forging a path forward from heartbreak and loss. Even as Isabella moved forward, dark clouds hovered on the horizon. Lacey, it seemed, was determined to flaunt her triumph at every opportunity. One night, Tessa convinced Isabella to go out for a drink at a chic new lounge in Beverly Hills. They arrived in Tessa's used Honda, feeling a bit out of place amidst the Rolls-Royces and Lamborghinis parked outside. Inside, dim lighting and plush velvet couches screamed luxury. They found a small corner table and ordered cocktails. The conversation flowed, mostly about Tessa's new marketing job and Isabella's progress at the Gazette. But halfway through the evening, Isabella's blood ran cold. She spotted Lacey, clad in a sparkling designer dress, entering the lounge on Adrian's arm. Tessa noticed the sudden change in Isabella's demeanor. What? Ugh! She followed Isabella's gaze and grimaced. Ugh, talk about bad luck. Want to leave? Isabella's pride flared. No, I'm not giving them the satisfaction. The next few minutes were a test of her composure. Lacey spotted them, and a predatory gleam lit her eyes. She practically dragged Adrian across the lounge to their table. Isn't this a coincidence? Lacey chirped too loudly. She eyed Isabella with faux surprise. How are you, Bella? Still writing your little newspaper stories? Adrian stood by quietly, a bored look on his face, maybe even mild discomfort, as if he realized Lacey was crossing boundaries but wouldn't rein her in. Isabella managed a polite smile. I'm actually enjoying my new career very much. Lacey smirked, swirling the champagne in her glass. Well, that's just lovely. You see, Adrian and I are planning to move to New York soon. He's got a big promotion coming. Isabella kept her face neutral. Congratulations. I wish you well. Lacey's lips parted, revealing teeth that glinted like a viper's fangs. Really, Bella, I feel sorry for you. I heard you moved in with a friend. Must be tough financially. But who knows? Maybe you'll meet someone someday. Hopefully not another beggar. Isabella stiffened, her voice sharpening. I don't define people by their income. Unfazed, Lacey chuckled. You'll learn eventually, dear. Money matters. Then she pivoted, hooking her arm through Adrian's. We'll leave you to your modest evening. As they sauntered off, Tessa squeezed Isabella's arm. That woman is vile. Isabella exhaled, forcing down the tremors of rage. I won't let her get to me. But inside, Lacey's parting shot about a beggar stung deeper than she cared to admit. She was reminded of how quickly her own fortunes had changed, once living in a mansion, now barely scraping by. The thought of someone mocking Caleb that way, calling him a beggar, made her blood boil. People could be so cruel, but life had a way of turning the tables, and Isabella silently prayed for that day to come. A few days after that humiliating encounter, Isabella received a phone call from Bill Thompson, the director of the Safe Harbor Project. She was in the middle of finalizing an article when the phone buzzed. Isabella? Bill's voice was laced with a strange urgency. Listen, I need to talk to you about Caleb. I read your article, lovely piece, but I'm worried. Alarm shot through Isabella. Is he okay? I don't know, Bill admitted. He's a good guy, a tireless volunteer. But some men came by the shelter asking for him. Suits, expensive cars, the works. They tried to be discreet, but we're not blind. They wanted to know his whereabouts. Isabella's heart pounded. Did Caleb see them? He wasn't around at the time. I told them we don't give out personal information. Anyway, if you talk to him, please let him know. I don't want him caught off guard. They ended the call, and Isabella stared at her phone, a knot forming in her stomach. She remembered the vague hints Caleb gave about losing everything due to a business deal gone wrong. Could it be loan sharks? A hidden scandal. That evening she texted Caleb, asking him to meet. They agreed to meet at a quiet park the next morning. When he arrived, she wasted no time. Bill said some men were looking for you at Safe Harbor. You need to tell me what's going on. Are you in trouble? A flicker of unease crossed Caleb's features. He ran a hand through his hair. It's complicated, but fine. You deserve to know. He gestured to a park bench and they sat down together. In a low voice, he explained, before everything fell apart, I was involved with a tech startup. I'd actually co-founded it. We had big dreams, partnerships, expansions, all that. But a few people within the company engaged in shady dealings, money laundering, bribery. I had no idea until it was too late. The entire operation imploded, and I took the blame for a good chunk of it, even though I wasn't personally responsible. Investigations are ongoing. Some powerful investors lost a lot of money, and they hold me responsible. Isabella's eyes widened. So these men, they might be investors, debt collectors, or attorneys. I'm not even sure. But I don't have the funds to clear those debts right now, and my name is tainted. I can't exactly waltz into a new job with that scandal on my record. Volunteering is all I have. Her heart ached at the resignation in his voice. Have you tried fighting back legally? He shrugged. My lawyer is doing what he can, but it's a mess. At this point, I'm just trying to rebuild from scratch. Once everything is settled, I'll pay off what I owe. A wave of relief coursed through her. There was no malevolent secret, just a tragic turn of events. I'm sorry you've had to go through that. If you need help, he placed a gentle hand on hers. You've already helped by being a friend. That's more than most people have done. In that moment, looking into his earnest eyes, Isabella felt a surge of protectiveness. Caleb might have lost his money and reputation, but he was far richer in character than most. She wanted to stand by him, just as he'd quietly stood by so many at the shelter. As months passed, whispers about Lacey and Adrian's upcoming nuptials spread through their old social circle. It wasn't exactly a secret that Lacey was pregnant, a fact she flaunted to ensure Adrian remained by her side. The wedding date was set. Despite Isabella trying to move on, she couldn't avoid the rumors, especially when Tessa's co-workers or old acquaintances from Adrian's world gossiped about the lavish preparations. One evening, Isabella found herself covering a charity gala for the Gazette, an event ironically sponsored by Adrian's law firm. She had to be there as a journalist, not a guest. Her editor insisted it would be an interesting piece, focusing on philanthropic endeavors by top-tier law firms. Dreading a possible confrontation, she nonetheless attended with her press badge and camera. As she glided through the elegant ballroom, snapping photos and jotting down notes, she spotted Adrian and Lacey holding court at a VIP table. Lacey wore a glittering designer gown that highlighted her baby bump, glowing with self-satisfaction. Adrian looked polished in a tailored tuxedo, but something about his eyes was tired. Inevitably, their eyes met across the crowd. She tried to turn away, but it was too late. Adrian beckoned her over. Swallowing her reluctance, she approached. "Well, isn't this interesting?" Lacey drawled, resting a hand on her stomach. "Isabella, working the press circuit now, are we?" Isabella offered a polite smile. "I'm covering the event for the LA Gazette. Are you both enjoying yourselves?" Lacey's eyes flicked to Isabella's camera. "Lovely. Adrian, dear, doesn't she look well? I suppose she's doing her best." Adrian cleared his throat, looking around uncomfortably at the onlookers. "Lacey, don't make a scene. Isabella's here professionally." A sneer twisted Lacey's lips. "Oh, so you're defending her, are you?" Isabella rolled her eyes. "This is hardly the place for drama. Enjoy your evening." She turned on her heel to leave. Lacey's voice sliced the air. "By the way, Bella, I heard you're seeing someone new, some volunteer from a homeless shelter." The rumor mill says he's basically broke. Talk about a downgrade. But you always did have a soft spot for strays. Isabella froze, muscles tensing. She could handle insults directed at her, but insulting Caleb was another matter. However, she refused to stoop to Lacey's level. Without a word, she walked away, heart pounding. Behind her, she heard Adrian scold Lacey in hushed tones, "Could you not? You're causing a scene." For a fleeting second, Isabella felt a twisted satisfaction. At least Adrian was bearing some of Lacey's venom now. Soon after the gala, Isabella's life took another unexpected turn. Late one night, she found herself at the Safe Harbor project, finalizing interviews for a new piece. Caleb was there, quietly distributing donated clothes. They chatted briefly before a man in a crisp suit appeared at the entrance, scanning the crowd. Tension coiled in the air as he locked eyes with Caleb. Caleb's face darkened. He muttered a quick excuse to Isabella and stepped outside with the man. Concerned, she followed after a moment. Outside, the man's voice was low but urgent. "Mr. Bradford, your debts are still unpaid. Some of our clients are losing patience." Caleb's shoulders sagged. "I'm sorting it out. I just need more time." The man scoffed. "Time's up. Unless you have a substantial payment soon, we'll have to escalate the matter." With that, the stranger turned and strode away. Stepping back inside, Caleb slumped against the wall, looking more vulnerable than she'd ever seen him. Isabella approached gently, and he forced a weak smile. "Sorry you had to see that. Some investors still believe I owe them the lion's share of losses." Her heart ached. "Is there anything I can do?" He shook his head. "I'll figure it out. Don't worry." The following week, she noticed he seemed more subdued than usual. There were days he didn't show up at the shelter, and she'd get short, apologetic texts saying he was busy handling paperwork or meeting his lawyer. She felt helpless. She wasn't wealthy or connected. She couldn't pay off his debts, but she wanted to do something. One afternoon, Daniel Reyes called her into a small meeting room at the Gazette. He and the editor, Diane, were there, wearing identical excited grins. Diane wasted no time. "Isabella, your articles on Safe Harbor have drawn a lot of positive attention. A philanthropic organization, the Carson Foundation, read your pieces. They're interested in sponsoring a large-scale fundraiser, but they specifically requested you to lead the campaign coverage." Isabella's eyes lit up. "That's amazing. How can I help?" Diane's smile widened. "They want you to write a feature on philanthropic efforts in LA, focusing on individuals who represent hope in difficult times. Essentially, they want the face of Safe Harbor to be the story's heart. And from your articles, it seems Caleb is that face." A jolt ran through Isabella. "Caleb? He might not be comfortable with such a spotlight." Daniel cut in. "True, but if we can highlight him as someone who lost it all and now dedicates himself to helping others, it could inspire massive donations. Possibly enough to clear the shelter's expansion budget and maybe even help him settle some debts." The gears in Isabella's mind whirred. This might be the lifeline Caleb needed, but would he agree? Caleb was initially resistant to the idea. Public attention could also draw out old enemies or scrutinize his past. But Isabella gently pointed out the positives funds for the shelter, a chance to clear his name by showing the world he wasn't a con artist, but a victim of corporate fraud. Reluctantly, he agreed. Over the next few weeks, they worked together on interviews, photo shoots, even a short video feature showcasing the daily work at Safe Harbor. The Carson Foundation provided professional videographers, capturing Caleb's story in a respectful, powerful way. During this process, Isabella and Caleb spent countless hours together. Their bond strengthened, their gazes lingered, soft touches became more frequent. Late one night, after a particularly heartwarming interview with a family Safe Harbor had aided, Isabella walked Caleb back to his modest apartment. Before parting, he gently cupped her cheek, and they shared a lingering kiss under the streetlight's warm glow. It was a sweet, tentative beginning to something more. Neither declared undying love, but the affection was tangible. It felt like a promise that, in the midst of chaos, they had each other. The big fundraising gala, hosted by the Carson Foundation, was set for the following month. Held at the luxurious Bellevue Hotel, the event promised to be a glittering spectacle. High-profile donors, celebrities, local politicians, all would gather to support the Safe Harbor project, with Caleb Bradford as the evening's keynote speaker. Isabella wore a simple yet elegant black dress, hair pinned up. She hovered near the stage with her notepad, ready to capture the night's magic. Caleb, dressed in a tailored suit provided by the foundation, looked every bit the dignified man she knew him to be. Though nerves shone in his eyes, he carried himself well. The event began with a video montage. Short interviews showcased the shelter's impact. Then, Caleb was introduced. Applause erupted as he stepped onto the stage. Isabella's heart soared with pride. He started speaking, voice shaky at first, but gradually strengthening. He told his story, how he once believed success was measured by money and status, how betrayal and bad luck cost him everything. Yet in his darkest moment, he found meaning in serving those in need. His authenticity moved the crowd. By the end of his speech, tears glistened in many eyes. The applause thundered. Pledges of donations poured in. Isabella glanced around, breathless with joy. She noticed a few well-known figures in attendance, including Jessica Alba, who was rumored to be a major contributor, and Bill Gates's philanthropic liaison, who was discreetly sitting near the back, clear signs that the event had major traction. After the speech, Caleb stepped down, exhaling a tremulous breath. Isabella rushed forward, hugging him tightly. "You did it," she whispered. The foundation announced that they had exceeded their fundraising goal by a significant margin. It was a triumph for Safe Harbor and for Caleb, but fate, it seemed, had one more dramatic twist to offer. Just as the celebration crescendoed, a murmur spread through the ballroom. Adrian Santos strode in, flanked by none other than Lacey, who was heavily pregnant and sporting an arrogant scowl. Isabella's stomach flipped. What on earth were they doing here? It didn't take long to discover the reason. The law firm Adrian worked for had ties to some of the old investors in Caleb's defunct startup. Word had spread that Caleb was receiving positive press, and Adrian, always opportunistic, smelled a story or a chance to smear. Caleb stiffened as Adrian approached him. Lacey hovered behind, lips twisted in a mocking smile. "Well, well, if it isn't the elusive Caleb Bradford," Adrian sneered. "You made quite a splash tonight." Caleb's jaw clenched. "Is there something I can help you with?" Adrian cocked his head. "You might remember some of the big players you, let's say, lost money for. They're curious how you can afford such a glamorous comeback." Isabella bristled. "The funds raised tonight are for the shelter, not for personal use," Lacey snorted. "Oh, so he's still broke, just a poster boy for charity? Seems like a perfect match for you, Bella, now that you're both scraping pennies." Caleb's fists tightened, and Isabella grabbed his arm to keep him calm. She spoke coolly. "Caleb's debts will be addressed legally. Why are you both here anyway?" Adrian's eyes flicked to Caleb. "Because I represent some parties considering a lawsuit. If Mr. Bradford's publicly presenting himself as a champion of honesty and charity, they feel it's time the full truth came to light." A hush fell, tension thick enough to slice. Before Caleb could respond, Bill Thompson, the shelter director, stepped forward. "Not tonight, Mr. Santos. This is a charitable event. If you have legal concerns, bring them up in the proper channels." Adrian squared his shoulders, but the glare from the assembled guests deterred him from further confrontation. He gave a tight nod, spinning on his heel. Lacey lingered a second longer, eyes flicking between Caleb and Isabella, a sneer plastered on her face. Then she followed Adrian out. The event resumed, albeit with a lingering tension. Isabella turned to Caleb. "I'm so sorry." His expression was resolute. "Don't apologize. If they want to sue, let them. I'll face it. But nothing can take away from tonight's success for the shelter." Isabella squeezed his hand in solidarity, yet worry gnawed at her. Adrian's interference was never a good sign. Not long after the gala, an article appeared in one of the larger newspapers, dredging up details of the collapsed tech startup. The piece heavily implied Caleb was the main culprit behind the financial losses, labeling him a failed entrepreneur living off charity. It was a cheap shot, likely spurred by Adrian's connections. Online trolls clamored, calling him a fraud and a hypocrite. Caleb's phone rang incessantly, reporters seeking a sensational story, investors threatening lawsuits, old acquaintances offering false sympathy. The stress weighed on him like a millstone. Isabella visited him one evening. She found him pacing the living room, phone in hand, hair disheveled. "They're painting me as a con artist," he said in a raw voice. All the good from the fundraiser might be overshadowed. She gently placed her hands on his shoulders, trying to ground him. "Don't let them twist the narrative. We'll respond with facts. We have testimonies from people who worked with you, from those who know you best." He let out a shaky breath. "I don't want the shelter to suffer because of me." She thought for a moment, then her gaze hardened. "You need to tell your story, publicly and in detail. No more vague references. The LA Gazette can run a thorough piece with evidence and testimonials clearing your name. The truth always outshines slander, Caleb." He stared at her for a long moment, then he nodded. "All right, let's do it." As the storm raged around them, their personal bond deepened. Late-night strategy sessions turned into intimate moments of confession. One night, after drafting statements to the press, they sat on his small balcony, watching the city lights shimmer. "You're amazing," he murmured, sliding his arm around her. "I couldn't face this without you." Isabella nestled against him, heart beating steadily. "You gave me hope when I was lost. Now it's my turn." He pressed a kiss to her temple. They gazed at the stars, silently promising to stand together no matter what. Determined to clear Caleb's name, Isabella worked tirelessly. She interviewed former colleagues of Caleb. Some were reluctant. Others came forward eagerly, testifying that Caleb tried to expose the wrongdoing before the company imploded. She dug through legal documents, obtaining statements that showed how the real culprits funneled money into offshore accounts. She unearthed email chains that painted a clearer picture. It was investigative journalism at its finest, reminiscent of the old ambitions she had in college. Daniel and Diane at the Gazette provided the green light for a multi-part expose. Once published, it created an immediate buzz in local media circles. Public opinion began to shift. Major philanthropic figures stepped in, acknowledging Caleb's authenticity. Even Bill Gates's philanthropic liaison made a statement on social media, lauding the power of second chances and praising the thorough investigative work. As for Adrian and Lacey, their attempt to paint Caleb as a villain backfired. People saw the parallels with how Adrian had treated Isabella, and the public disliked bullies. Adrian's own reputation took a hit. Anonymous sources hinted that his superiors weren't pleased with the negative attention. Just when it seemed everything was stabilizing, another bombshell dropped. Caleb received an email from an anonymous sender requesting a private meeting at a swanky downtown office. The email claimed it was regarding a lucrative business opportunity. Isabella accompanied him to the meeting. Curiosity piqued. They arrived at an upscale office suite. A poised receptionist ushered them into a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. After a few minutes, a distinguished older gentleman stepped in. He introduced himself as Robert Whitmore, a venture capitalist who'd read Isabella's expose. "I'm impressed by your resilience and moral compass," Robert said, focusing on Caleb. "I believe in second chances. I also believe you have the know-how to create something meaningful if given proper support." He laid out a proposal, a new tech initiative aimed at developing digital platforms for non-profit organizations, streamlining fundraising and volunteer coordination. Robert wanted Caleb at the helm. The salary offered was substantial, and an equity share was on the table if the project succeeded. Caleb's eyes were wide with astonishment. "Why me?" Robert smiled. "Because you've walked the path of adversity. You understand the non-profit world on a personal level. And, from what I've read, your old startup had some truly innovative ideas. With me providing capital and oversight, we can avoid the pitfalls you encountered before." For a moment, time stood still. Isabella gripped Caleb's hand under the table. She could scarcely believe it. This was the redemption arc he deserved. Caleb swallowed hard, tears glistening. "I'd be honored. Thank you." Caleb's big breakthrough arrived when a venture capitalist named Robert Whitmore invited him to a high-profile meeting. Impressed by Caleb's perseverance and moral compass, thanks to the expose Isabella, wrote Robert, offered him a second chance. He proposed a new tech platform called HopeLink, designed to help non-profits streamline their fundraising and volunteer efforts. Still bruised by past scandals, Caleb hesitated, but Robert's faith in him was unwavering. With Isabella's support, he accepted. At the official launch of HopeLink, crowds of entrepreneurs, philanthropists, and tech enthusiasts gathered to witness Caleb's presentation. Nervous yet resolute, he demonstrated the platform's potential, a simple interface connecting charities with donors and volunteers. His genuine passion and the honesty of his backstory captivated everyone. By the day's end, a dozen non-profits signed up, and numerous investors expressed interest, transforming Caleb from a disgraced founder into a rising CEO. Meanwhile, Adrian's life spiraled downward. His attempt to smear Caleb had backfired, drawing scrutiny to his own ethical breaches. As the law firm's leadership examined his involvement with unscrupulous investors, Adrian's once sterling reputation cracked. Lacey, pregnant and unwilling to settle for a diminished lifestyle, began to question her marriage. Rumors circulated that she might leave if Adrian's prestige vanished. What should have been their grand wedding shrank into a tense, practical ceremony, riddled with whispers about an uncertain future. In stark contrast, Caleb's sense of purpose flourished. Having paid off lingering debts, he now devoted his evenings to helping safe harbor and mentoring newcomers in the tech world. His relationship with Isabella blossomed into something deep and certain. One evening, after celebrating the signing of HopeLink's third major partnership, Caleb guided her through a moonlit garden. There, by a quiet fountain draped in starry reflections, he proposed. Overwhelmed by memories of heartbreak and triumphant renewal, Isabella said yes. Instead of the ostentation she once knew, Isabella chose a simple, meaningful wedding. Surrounded by the people whose lives they had touched and who had touched theirs, they held their ceremony in Safe Harbor's courtyard. Tessa, radiant with happiness, acted as Isabella's maid of honor, while volunteers, friends, and colleagues formed a circle of genuine warmth. When they said their vows, the applause shook with sincere emotion. They had found in each other not just love, but a partner to weather any storm. From that day forward, Caleb and Isabella continued to inspire hope. Their story, an unlikely romance born of adversity, proved that integrity and kindness could triumph against betrayal and greed. United in purpose and passion, they built a life anchored in generosity. And for those who once mocked them, fate had delivered the final twist. The so-called beggar was, in truth, a visionary CEO, while those who prize money over conscience found themselves entangled in regret. And there you have it, a tale that proves how heartbreak and betrayal can forge a path to unimaginable triumph. In the end, it isn't money that defines a person's worth, but resilience, kindness, and unwavering hope. When the mistress mocked the ex-wife for marrying a beggar, she had no idea she was setting the stage for the greatest plot twist of all, one where true love, integrity, and fortitude conquer shallow vanity. Caleb and Isabella's journey reminds us that second chances can spark miracles, and that sometimes, in losing everything, we discover what truly matters. If this story moved you, please show your support by hitting the like button, sharing it with friends who need a reminder that good hearts can win, and subscribing to the channel for more tales of real-life drama, inspirational twists, and powerful comeuppances. Your engagement helps us continue sharing these captivating stories. Thank you for watching and believing in second chances.